One major development going on now involves more to do with Rachel Zegler and her attitude towards South Park Studios and Paramount after learning about what they are planning for their upcoming special called the DEI Special.
The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway, and that's when I started to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced. And finally, I want to scream, and I'm like, why are they replacing every single character with someone who is diverse?
Rachel Zegler's role in the Snow White 2025 remake has sparked endless controversy, drawing harsh criticism from loyal fans of the 1937 classic and even modern viewers who were eager to see Disney's new take on a cherished tale. Tensions had already been boiling over after Rachel's comments about the original story being outdated, her seeming disregard for the beloved aspects of the film, and the increasing chaos behind the scenes.
Exactly what they're doing. And that is why we hate the diversity, equity, and inclusion casting and writing in movies.
Things took a sharp dive when a South Park episode aired a biting parody of the Snow White debacle, even featuring a caricature of Rachel herself. The animated show's savage take on the situation, though short, went viral in no time, and just hours later, reports started circulating that Rachel Zegler was furious over the portrayal, feeling it only piled on more humiliation to an already messy situation inside Disney.
Now active involves more to do with both South Park Studios and Paramount, and what they recently did toward both Zegler and the Disney company for their Snow White film. It turns out that both Trey Parker and Matt Stone are already preparing for the DEI special that is set to serve as a sequel to the Panderverse.
The reaction was pure panic, as if Bob Iger and Disney leadership didn't already have enough on their plates. Struggling releases The Daredevil, Born Again disaster on Disney+, and growing concerns about recent Marvel projects. The fact that Snow White was now being roasted in a mainstream animated comedy only fueled the mounting fears.
Snow White is the first American feature-length animated movie, 1937. It's one of the most beloved movies of all time.
No strangers to controversy, South Park creators have long skewered celebrities and pop culture with sharp humor that often leaves their targets stunned. This time, the satirical version of Rachel Zegler was shown ripping into everyone around her, blasting the 1937 film and declaring the new Snow White was all about saving society, all while completely ignoring both her co-stars and the fictional Disney executives in the storyline. As soon as the parody aired, the internet exploded. Memes spread like wildfire. Fans analyzed every jab, and speculation soared about whether Disney's higher-ups would ever respond. People shared clips on social media, pointing out eerie similarities to real-life interviews Rachel Zegler had given, especially her fictional meltdown when Snow White realized she was stealing all the spotlight from the evil queen.
Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed, because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
Even those who were only vaguely aware of the Snow White controversy suddenly found themselves pulled into the drama, thanks to South Park's sharp comedic take. Almost immediately, hashtags like #SnowWhiteFiasco and #Rachel Zegler started trending, right alongside mentions of Bob Iger's leadership struggles and Disney's broader troubles. As rumors spread that Rachel Zegler was privately seething over the parody, industry insiders shared that she felt completely blindsided. Sources close to her camp claimed that, from her point of view,
our rights are on the line, folks.
Bitch! The right to buy Cosby sweaters?
Come on.
That's the face of a serial killer.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button.
Comedic take was harsh and unfair, portraying Rachel as a deranged diva who hated the original Snow White. It was rumored that she considered releasing a statement to clear up her actual views on the 1937 classic, but Disney allegedly pushed her to stay silent, fearing that any comments would only make things worse. This came on the heels of a broader corporate strategy to limit her appearances on major talk shows and events, which had already created serious tension between Rachel and Disney's leadership.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely, when it got announced,
Snow White!
He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
Thing that was like trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
In the weeks leading up to the South Park parody, several talk show invitations and promotional appearances for Rachel Zegler were suddenly canceled by Disney. Officially, they were due to scheduling conflicts or unforeseen adjustments, but multiple insiders insisted the real reason was Disney's desire to avoid more controversial comments. Rachel's previous interviews, where she spoke about revolutionizing the Snow White myth, had already turned off fans who held the original film dear.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely literally wrote a Snow White
that
is
not going to be saved by
You
the
wrote
prince.
it?
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be.
Rumors of tension between Rachel and Gal Gadot swirled, sparked by an awkward awards ceremony appearance where the two barely made eye contact, adding fuel to the fire that something was seriously off with this production behind the scenes. Disney executives were reportedly in a panic. What was once a foolproof strategy of remaking classic films now seemed to be backfiring, triggering heated internal debates on how to handle Rachel Zegler's bold, outspoken stance.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Say it louder so your other eye can hear you.
Some argued that the push to revitalize the 1937 film was too forceful, tearing apart beloved story elements for the sake of messaging that could strip away the original magic. On the other hand, some warned that today's audiences wanted modern values, and that a reimagined story should accurately reflect a more contemporary perspective.
It was supposed to come out like a year and a half ago, and then we went after them so hard because of their variety of ridiculous sins that they actually went into full-scale reshoots on Snow White when we announced that we had a competitor.
But no consensus ever formed, and the meltdown only became more public. Enter South Park, which gleefully mocked the entire debacle, including Rachel's now infamous comment that the original film felt outdated and out of touch with modern sensibilities. The show thrust the controversy into the spotlight, making it a mainstream pop culture spectacle for days. The storyline was no longer just about an actress criticizing a classic or a rumored feud with her co-star. It was something much bigger.
It was the first animated film that had the kind of Disney magic that had depth, that had absolute, it was riveting. And it's based, of course, on a Brothers Grimm story.
Became clear that Snow White 2025 was now so widely mocked that even a satirical cartoon, famous for its sharp criticism, had jumped in. Critics warned this was a massive red flag for a film already struggling to avoid more negative attention. Over the weekend, social media users picked up on what they thought were Rachel Zegler's cryptic posts, hinting at her frustration, possibly a subtle dig at the parody.
And this started with the movie star Rachel Zegler, who I believe would be categorized as a loudmouth dope.
Some fans pointed out how comedic caricatures can overshadow real discussions about progress. They sympathized, feeling that while South Park's approach was funny, it unfairly turned nuanced debates into mere punchlines. But many others argued that the show simply nailed the public's frustration with yet another Disney remake trampling on a beloved classic. Reactions were all over the place, with new memes popping up mocking the idea of a Snow White crusade to save society.
As an actor, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to dictate if a film actually happens. You don't get to dictate when it is shot, how it is shot, if you can ever speak about it to the public. You are simply just there to show up and say your lines and look the way they want you to look.
As hinted by the comedic portrayal, Disney seemed either unable or unwilling to put up an effective defense. Executives reportedly feared that responding to South Park's parody would only invite more ridicule. After all, any public condemnation from the target had historically only boosted the show's comedic appeal. Still, the absence of a clear response fueled rumors that Disney was in chaos. It was said that meetings with Bob Iger and the board of directors were happening almost daily as they scrambled to prevent Snow White 2025 from becoming a complete disaster.
God forbid a woman dream about true love. We're all just sitting around here, maybe I could be president one day. I hate men, I just want to be president. That screams Disney princess. Oh my God, I'm literally getting enraged. Once again, I feel like I'm back in 2022.
Perhaps it was already too late. Every time new details leaked, whether about Rachel's fury or the TV roast, the focus shifted further away from the actual movie and more toward the ongoing spectacle of drama. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler's relationship with Disney continued to unravel. Insiders claimed she felt abandoned, with the company refusing to defend her from mounting criticism. She believed their decision to cancel her talk show appearances might have even violated parts of her contract that guaranteed promotional opportunities. The tension reportedly reached a boiling point, with her team quietly considering legal action.
Yeah, the entire film's about a love story. I mean, it's about a love story because that's what the point of the film is, and I'm sorry that chivalry in a man pursuing you is now deemed as stalking, which now it's kind of making sense why men are opting out of the dating scene.
It was unclear whether the threat of a lawsuit was a negotiating tactic or a genuine plan, but either way, the idea of a legal battle between a rising star and a powerhouse like Disney sent even more rumors flying, especially after the South Park episode aired. On top of all this, Gal Gadot's role became an increasingly complicated issue. Originally cast in a major part, she had been a major draw for fans eager to see her take on the evil queen, but behind-the-scenes reports of tension between her and Rachel Zegler spilled into the public eye when the two refused to interact at a major event.
I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and then I never picked it up again. I watched it for the first time in probably 17 years.
Rumors ran wild that the two had clashed over creative differences, with Rachel allegedly complaining that Gal's improvised lines were hijacking key scenes. Tension escalated so much that whispers spread about entire sequences being cut just to appease the lead actress. This idea gained even more traction after South Park's comedic take, which showed the Snow White character yelling at a caricature of the evil queen for stealing the spotlight. To fans and onlookers, the whole fiasco took on a nearly surreal quality. On one side, you had a large group of viewers who felt the new film was trampling all over a beloved classic.
On the original production, I was scared of it. Oh, it was so weird. It was a stalker. Like, I feel like if you are taking on the most iconic Disney role ever, genuinely, like this was the most prolific Disney film, I feel like you should kind of have some sort of reverence for the original production.
On the other side, there were supporters of modernization who praised Rachel Zegler's ambition to create a more relevant, contemporary Snow White. Some viewers were genuinely curious to see how the final product would blend the timeless Disney magic with today's sensibilities. But the flood of negative buzz, driven by relentless rumors, confirmed cancellations, and now comedic jabs from a major pop culture force, seemed to drown out any hope of the film getting a fair assessment. Cancelled promotional events only added to the chaos. Interviews on top-tier late-night talk shows were reportedly scrapped, a Saturday Night Live performance in costume was called off, and a rumored grand musical showcase at Disney World never happened. Each time fans hoped for an appearance, a last-minute announcement claimed scheduling conflicts had caused a change. Insiders, however, insisted the studio was simply terrified of letting Rachel speak her mind.
In addition to that, there was already an uproar about her being cast as Snow White because she is not Caucasian, she is a Latina, she is half Colombian, and so people were like, why were you cast in the first place? We just had a black Little Mermaid, now we're having a Latina Snow White, and she is literally called Snow White, this doesn't make sense.
One anonymous source described the studio's actions as a preemptive strike against any further comments that might fuel fan outrage. With the South Park episode's popularity skyrocketing, more managers in Disney's public relations team were said to be on high alert, fearing the show might mock the film again if another disaster occurred. Bob Iger, who had returned as CEO with a reputation for deftly managing corporate crises, found himself in a tricky situation. From the critics' perspective, the meltdown with Snow White proved that Disney's approach to reimagining classics had become reckless. Observers pointed out that, with a string of recent box office disappointments, Iger couldn't afford another flop. Even worse, the negative buzz wasn't just about the film, it was damaging the entire Disney brand at a time when the media landscape was growing fiercer. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler herself seemed more isolated by the day. While she had her fair share of supporters, many from older generations criticized her for what they saw as a condescending attitude toward the 1937 film. Some younger fans felt she was being unfairly silenced by corporate forces trying to control the narrative. Others pointed to South Park's exaggerated portrayal as a sign that Rachel had lost touch with her role in the film's reimagining. Amid the chaos, leaks from the production crew suggested the set had been tense for months, with multiple rounds of reshoots and rewrites in a desperate attempt to fix a broken third act. Industry watchers noted that Disney's overall approach to content creation might be shifting as a result of this fiasco. Iger had hinted at reducing, or at least being more selective about, themes that could spark intense public backlash. Some suspected that the Snow White meltdown was a direct factor in that change, though official statements were vague. Commentators noted that if the new Snow White still carried strong social commentary, the adjustments might be superficial, designed to placate critics in the short term rather than represent a genuine shift in direction. As this corporate tug-of-war raged on, Rachel Zegler's public image took a serious hit. Once hailed as an exciting new talent with standout performances in other projects, her connection to the Snow White disaster had begun to tarnish her reputation. Casting agents and producers beyond Disney were surely taking note. How Rachel Zegler handled the intense scrutiny became a topic of debate. Some believed that a future star of her caliber should have navigated the controversy more gracefully, while her defenders argued she was being unfairly scapegoated. Regardless of the verdict, the comedic jabs from a show as influential as South Park solidified her as a lightning rod for debate, overshadowing other aspects of her growing career. For some fans, particularly those less attached to tradition, the satirical portrayal was just part of the spectacle. They reasoned that, as historically significant as the original Snow White was, an update was inevitable. They had no issue with deviating from certain traditional elements as long as the movie delivered a captivating story. But those voices were drowned out by the endless controversies, her statements, the rumored tensions with Bob Iger, and the alleged fallout with Gal Gadot. For many, the project was completely overshadowed by an unrelenting chain of negative headlines, and the South Park parody only made things worse. Amidst all the speculation, one question kept popping up. Could the film's final product rise above all this drama? Big productions with chaotic behind-the-scenes stories sometimes still find an audience if the story, performances, or visuals are strong enough. If audiences were treated to stunning set pieces, emotional depth, or a masterful portrayal of the evil queen's menace, perhaps word of mouth could save the film. But as each new twist emerged, another canceled appearance, another rumor of on-set shouting, another comedic jab from late-night or animated satire, the focus shifted further away from the potential quality of the movie. Interestingly, the satire didn't just target Rachel Zegler. South Park also took aim at Disney's corporate apparatus, portraying bungling executives desperately trying to spin any new developments. They were shown calling emergency meetings to silence the star's comments, scrambling to salvage marketing strategies, only to be thwarted by her uncontainable antics. While obviously exaggerated, this resonated with the public's perception of leadership gridlock at Disney's highest levels. Some viewers even found themselves sympathizing, if only slightly, with the executives, given the challenge of modernizing a property so beloved by fans. As for Rachel, rumors continued that she was already seeking roles beyond Snow White 2025, eager to leave the fiasco behind. Whether those opportunities would come to fruition remained unclear. Hollywood can be forgiving when box office returns are strong, but if Snow White stumbled, some insiders feared the fallout could tarnish her career for years. The image of her losing it over both the original storyline and the parody continued to overshadow any potential fresh start she might attempt. Eventually, the conversation around the film reached a boiling point, blurring the lines between rumor and reality. Each day brought fresh speculation. Had an entire musical number been cut due to panic over the South Park episode? Were reshoots scheduled again to soften Rachel's portrayal, giving the evil queen more heroic moments to shift the focus? Or was Disney so rattled that it would delay the release date once again, hoping the controversies would subside? The lack of clear, coordinated public communication only fueled the rumor mill, with fans eagerly filling in the blanks with the most intriguing or scandalous versions of events. Cultural commentators jumped in, suggesting that this meltdown was emblematic of a larger issue in Hollywood's reboot culture. When studios dive into iconic archives and attempt to overhaul timeless tales, they walk a tightrope between innovation and respect for tradition. If they lean too heavily into contemporary messaging, they risk alienating purists. If they stay too close to the original, they risk being seen as outdated or unimaginative. Rachel Zegler, in championing a modern Snow White, had unintentionally sparked a bonfire of controversies that seemed unstoppable. Yet, no single factor was responsible for the meltdown. It was the confluence of all these elements that made the situation so explosive. A storm of circumstances fueled the growing chaos surrounding Snow White 2025. An actress openly criticizing the source material, a corporation paralyzed by indecision, a co-star rumored to be at odds with the lead, repeated cancellations of promotional events, fans reacting intensely to every news update, and finally South Park zeroing in on the fiasco with its signature sharp wit. Each of these elements combined to create an explosive media firestorm. As the film's release loomed, the entire situation became a striking example of how quickly a high-budget project could spiral out of control. Rachel Zegler seemed to be in a standoff with her own employers, her brand tarnished by ongoing controversies. Bob Iger and the Disney board scrambled to contain the crisis, only for each day to bring more complications. Gal Gadot, mostly silent throughout, saw her rumored tensions with Rachel linger. Meanwhile, fans were left wondering, would the new Snow White be a groundbreaking reimagining or a disaster, destined to be remembered as one of Disney's biggest blunders? In any case, the South Park parody cemented a public narrative. Rachel Zegler was the catalyst behind a series of controversies that might have otherwise simmered quietly in fan forums. The show's comedic portrayal of a diva-like actress who had gone too far struck a chord with viewers who were already questioning Rachel's real-life comments. If Rachel was indeed as furious as reports suggested, it seemed impossible to see how her anger would dissipate anytime soon, especially with how the internet has a way of immortalizing such moments. As for Disney, their official silence became the default strategy. Any public statement could invite further ridicule, and any attempt to silence commentary might be seen as overbearing. Tension within the company was palpable, with corporate leaders torn between letting the storm die down on its own or stepping into the fray to issue clarifications, both of which were risky moves. Inside the studio, critics joked that Disney's once careful image management had crumbled, undone by an outspoken star, a wave of loyal fans, and a satirical cartoon that had devoured trending topics for fun. Regardless of whether the film ultimately finds stability, the spectacle surrounding Snow White 2025, and particularly Rachel Zegler, will remain a textbook case in modern franchise filmmaking. Fans will continue to debate whether her outspokenness was a courageous stand for modernizing a classic or a reckless disregard for tradition. Critics will question whether Disney mishandled an opportunity to deliver a forward-thinking adaptation. And, of course, the memory of that South Park episode will remain a cultural landmark, marking the moment the fiasco crossed into mainstream comedic territory. Long after the credits roll, people will remember the chain of events. Rachel's initial comments about the film's outdated themes, the rumored falling out with Gal Gadot, the canceled talk show appearances, and the final straw of being mocked on a top-rated animated series. Whether or not she truly lost it, as tabloids claimed, the overarching drama suggests she was cornered and misunderstood, leaving Disney scrambling to contain a growing storm of its own making. In the end, this entire incident serves as a cautionary tale of how fragile the balance can be when reworking something as iconic as Snow White. One misstep can trigger intense backlash, and when that backlash is amplified by a satirical juggernaut like South Park, it can become a cultural moment that reverberates far beyond the film itself. For Rachel Zegler, for Bob Iger, for Gal Gadot, and for everyone else involved, the question remains: can the finished film rise above its tarnished reputation, or will it forever be known as the remake that ignited a perfect storm of corporate indecision, fan outrage, and comedic mockery? Only time, and perhaps box office returns, will provide any definitive answers. But for now, the Snow White meltdown stands as a stark reminder of how quickly a high-profile remake can veer off course when the lead actress and the studio are out of sync, and when a show like South Park decides to turn that drama into satirical gold.